Hey, welcome to day 4 of the coding camp. I'm here with the family again today. So we got Keegan, age 8. We've got Mom and Bowen. Bowen's age 6. And then we've got Sissy, age 10. You guys ready to code some today? All right, let's show an example of what we're going to be making today. So we're going to be making a race car game today. So here's my race car. He's going around the track. What we're going to do is we're going to draw this car. So we're going to actually draw this sprite ourselves. The car is going to always be moving, and I'm using the right arrow to turn right, and then the left arrow to turn left. And as you can imagine, the car is going around the track at whatever speed you, the programmer, design. And if you touch the color green, which is around the outside and the middle, then my car crashes. And so it crashed, and it actually is playing a little animation as well. I really like this project because it's got a lot of good enhancements. Here's an enhanced version of one that I made. This is a 2-player game. So like one person would be the blue car, and then the other person would be the red car. And they would play against each other. And you can also do things like if you touch these little red pills, they speed you up. If you touch a green pill, green speeds you up, and then red slows you down. There's all kinds of things you could do. You could even add things like a finish line. He would get there and win, but instead he's going to crash. And so I like the different enhancements and things you can make to this one. So let's go ahead and get started actually building it. Some of the learning objectives this time that are new is we're going to be learning about animations and functions. So some really important things today. So go ahead and click on Create New Project. And like I always do, I like to click on Blank Block Coding Project. So there's a lot of different things that have to get done. We've got to draw the track. We've got to draw the car. We've got to add the code for the car. Can't really decide where I want to start because there's so much to do. Let's start with a little drawing, right? So let's start with drawing our car. So we don't need the monster. He's a great actor, but we don't need him this time. Instead, we're going to add our own actor and we're going to draw a car. So I'm going to say add actor and I'm going to say drawing tool. Now everybody draws at different speeds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of like quickly make mine and then encourage you to pause the video when you make yours. So here's what I'm going to do. The first thing I like to do is I like to make sure I'm zoomed to see the whole canvas. My daughter McKinley yelled at me. She's like, why don't you ever use the 75% button? It's right here in the middle. And I said, because I didn't know about it. Thank you for teaching me about it. So if you click in the middle, you can pick a zoom, and 75% is a good zoom for at least mine. So what you want to do is you want to decide what color you want your car to be. So I've been using red as my car, so I just kind of pick out a red. And like I said, I'm going to do this kind of quick. But what I like to do to make a car is I like to draw a block, which is roughly in the middle, and that's going to be my car. And then I draw a rectangle kind of for the windows. And so I'm going to go ahead and draw another rectangle here. I guess I had to click off that rectangle. A rectangle for the windows. This is just my style for my car. If you want your car to be entirely different, that's fine. And then I want to draw that same color again. So I'm going to use the eyedropper to pick it back. And then draw kind of like another rectangle here. Now that may not feel like a car at first, but it kind of is going to work out to be a car. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw some lines to connect from the corners here to the corners there. And I think that I'm starting to kind of have the feel of the top view of a car. So you want the top view of a car. A car is not a car until you have tires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my tires. And whenever I make something, I still select it. That's an opportunity to hit Control-C, Control-V, and you can make another one of them. So if you want to, you can kind of like copy-paste your tires. Again, I know that this is way too fast for you to directly follow along, but I'm trying to kind of show you the basics. And then once you've got your 4 tires on, I consider that good enough, right? If you want to make enhancements to it, like you want to add headlights or you want to add tail lights, that's fine. But I think that this is a perfectly acceptable car. So now I'm going to name my costume. Right now it's called blank. I'm going to name it car. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save just so that I can save my current car. And now what I want to do is I want to make another, so pause the video until you make your car, all right? Pause the video, make your car. All right, now we've all got a car. So now I want to make another version of the car that's crashed, right? So a crash car. So to make another version of something, right now it's selected up here. I'm going to click on this copy button, right? So when I click on copy, it makes a copy of my car. This next car I'm going to call Crash. Now there's a bunch of ways to crash a car. You could just scribble on it with lines. That's certainly a fine way to crash a car, so you could just kind of scribble all over it. You could make, orange flames on top of it. Oops, thought I was going to change colors there. Orange flames on it, and that's kind of crashing as well. There's another trick that I find fun. This selection tool, you can kind of like select a wedge of your car and then just kind of like move it or rotate it. And I find that that's always a really good way to kind of like make something have an appearance of, you just got crashed, right? So, and if you wanted to go crazy, I know that every time I teach this class, somebody just completely explodes their car. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Personally, I think it looks better if it's kind of close to a car still, but you do whatever makes you happy. So there's my crash car. So pause the video until you have these two animations. By the way, you can hit the play button here and it'll just kind of show you like, here's normal, here's crashed. So when you hit a wall, you're going to switch to that crash. All right, so I'm going to save that up. And I'm going to head back to my game. Now my car is currently much too big for a track, right? So I'm going to have to make my car much smaller. And again, this is why I encourage you not to necessarily go nuts with drawing headlights and stuff, because once your car is small enough, you can only see so many of those details. While we're still in the drawing mood, we've got to draw a track. So let's go ahead and draw a track really quick. So click on the stage. Say add background. Click on the paintbrush because we're going to draw our track and say draw an image. Now your track, let me get this 75%, thanks McKinley. Your track is going to need to have a border around the outside so people can't just like drive off into space. And it's going to have something in the middle and it's going to have enough room that you can actually get around. But other than that, you can do whatever you want. So what I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to make a border around the outside that's maybe like 10 pixels in thickness. I'm going to choose like maybe a green color of some sort. Maybe I'll choose like a dark green. By the way, this hex value is going to be useful later, but I'll just wait until later before I worry about that. To make a border around the outside, I like to draw it to be nearly big enough. Maybe I'll make it perfectly big enough. If you make it perfect, then great, you're done. If it's not quite perfect, you just have to grab these little handles and just scooch it all the way till there's nothing showing on the outside. This is the same thing that we did for the maze, so hopefully it's something you're familiar with. Now we need to draw something in the middle. The middle can be whatever you'd like. If you want it to kind of be rectangular, you can do that. If you would rather it kind of be oval based, you can do that. But it should be a track that people can, get around, right? So maybe I'll make them kind of go through there and then up through here, but they should be able to drive around it. Your car is only so big, so you might want to give yourself some space to kind of drive things around, right? Maybe I'll add another little hump here. If you'd like to keep the background white, that's fine. But if you'd like to use a fill and make it kind of like a gray color, that's also fine, whatever you prefer. Also, feel free to decorate. I always like to put my name on things, right? So this is Dr. Fisher's track. Go with the more formal Dr. Fisher, right? It always likes to drop down a little bit at the end. Oh, well, I consider that a feature this time. And I think that looks good enough for me. So pause it as you need and make sure that you've got some type of track that you can get around and then go ahead and hit save. All right, so now we're ready to start in with the code. Drawing is definitely a useful skill. I definitely want you to do it. But I think we're good enough that you don't have to watch me do it anymore. You can just start making them yourself. So now it's time for the code. So here you will have to kind of follow along with me. Click on the car. If it bothers you, the name of my car is currently Actor. So I'm going to rename him Race Car. Oh, while I'm naming things, I should probably save my project. I usually forget to do this until like way later, but you really should save early and save often, right? So I'm just going to call it Race Car Track. I don't want to publish it yet. I'll publish it later. I just wanted to go ahead and save it early because I've done a lot of drawing, right? And I don't want to lose all my drawings. But now I'm ready to add some code to my race car. So my race car needs an on start. We've done that many times in our projects. That's just as soon as you hit the start button, that's stuff that happens. And we want some things to happen forever. So we're going to add a forever loop. So go to Control and go ahead and grab a forever loop. And we want to do things like we want to check to see if the user is telling us to turn. We want to move forwards. We want to check to see if we're crashed. And then, of course, we have to add that wait so that our loop doesn't happen like too fast. Now, normally, we just go grab the code and just put it in here. And there's nothing wrong with that. But today, I want to teach you something new about functions. Click on the button that says Functions. Today's game we're going to make using functions. Functions are good for making code that you can reuse. It's also good for organization. So what is a function? Let's go ahead and make one and we'll learn about it. So click on Create Function. We're going to make a function, and here you have to do some typing, that says check for turns. With functions in Tinker, you can use capital letters, you can use lowercase letters, you can put spaces in the name of the function, doesn't matter. I'm going to make mine check for turns and just use spaces as appropriate. Now, a function can also have parameters. We're not going to worry about that today. Maybe tomorrow we'll do that with our stars, right? But check for turns and click on Create. Now, when you click on Create, something happens, and they make for you a spot for this function. Now, usually it shows up right on my screen and I can see it. But if somehow you don't see that, just like zoom out until you find it and then move it to where you can see it. But what's going to happen here is under this check for turns, I'm going to put some code. And then whenever I want to call that function, I'll have to call it from my main loop. Let's go ahead and write the function together, and then we'll call it from our main loop. So check for turns. A check is an if statement. So we know we're going to have to add some if statements to this function. We're going to need a grand total of 2 if statements. So I'm going to move over 1 if statement, and I'm building up this function, right? And then I'm going to bring another if statement also into my function. Now, currently says if false, then, but really this is just a placeholder. So if some condition happens, then run this code. The condition we're looking for is the user pressing the left arrow. So let's go to sensing. And what we're looking for is we're looking for, are they pressing a key, right? So really what we want to do is we want like pressing some key. And down here is a good one. Key up arrow pressed. Now that's the wrong key, but you can see that that's probably a good starting point. And we don't want to check the up arrow. We want to check the left arrow. And then for the other one, we want to also check a key. And we're going to do the right arrow. Now I'm moving a little bit fast today. I don't know. I guess it's just warm outside. But feel free to pause the video if I'm doing things too quickly, right? So I've got a function over here, where you can see all my code. I've got a function over here with 2 if statements in it. And right now I'm making this function first, but I'm not actually calling this function. We're going to get to that in a second. So this function, if you're touching the left arrow, we want to turn to the left some number of degrees, right? So let's go ahead and find motion. And so if I'm pressing left arrow, I want to turn left. So you got to kind of like look at the little arrows on here. And if I was a car, this bottom one is a left turn. And then this top one is my right turn. Great. Now the amount, 15 degrees, you just have to kind of play with it and see how it goes. It depends on how fast your timing is. So I'm just going to leave it as 15 for now. And if I have to change it later, I have to change it later. So now we've written a function. So if we ever want to use this code, we can call this function. Let's go ahead and do that. So go back to functions. And this check for turns function that we've made, we want to call it as the first thing in our forever loop. So the first thing we do is we check for turns. So now the way our code works is it hits that function call, it hops over to this function, and it runs it, and then control comes back over here. Now the next thing I want to do after I check for turns is I want to move the car forward. So now I've kind of like done my steering. Now I want to move it forwards. That's in motion. I want to move 10 pixels. Now after I move 10 pixels, what I want to do is I want to check for a crash. And then I want to have a short time delay. Let's add the time delay and test it, and then we'll worry about crashes later. So let's add that time delay. Time delays are over in control. They're near the bottom, but not all the way to the bottom. And it says wait 1 second, and I'm going to pop that in there. Now 1 second is a very long time. That would make your game feel very like jumpy. So we're going to use the number that we've used in the past, and that's 0.05. That's 1/20th of a second. It makes your game play at 20 frames per second, essentially. So let's try it. If it all works, what should happen is you should be able to steer your car around using the left and right arrow. Now you can decide for you what you want to do about speeds. So right now the speed is that he's going forwards at 10 pixels and he's turning at 15 degrees. Now that's actually kind of a slow turn. Kind of a slow speed, but kind of a fast turn, right? If you like that, leave it, right? You don't have to change it. If you want to tweak it a little bit, feel free to tweak it. So if you wanted to, say, move at 15, you could. If you wanted to turn a little less hard, you could take those 15s down to 10s, and you could see what that was like, right? So now I don't turn as sharp, but I move kind of faster, right? So with your track and your car, decide what you want your speeds to be. And then just whatever you decide you want it to be, that's where you leave it. Cool, so I think it's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and add some more stuff. I'm gonna click save really quick. So we use this function purely for organization, right? So it makes our main loop easier to read. So it says check for turns, move 15. Now we want to check for crash. Let's make another function. So click on functions, create function, and we'll call this one check for crash. Again, you could actually name your function anything you wanted, uppercase, lowercase, using spaces, doesn't matter, and Tinker. Just pick a name that you like. And you'll see, I can kind of see mine sticking out over here. You'll see that it adds a function stub for you. So make sure you find that stub, right? Because that's important. That's where you're going to put your function. Now, just to be different this time, let's go ahead and call the function first, and then we'll write the function second. So to call the function, you take this check for crash. You can kind of see how it's a different shape. And I'm going to choose to put it right between the move and the time delay. Does it have to go there? Not really. It could go about anywhere in the loop because it doesn't matter what order you do these things. They come around so fast that it'll check for the crash pretty often. But I'm going to check right after I move. Now, if you were to play your game right now, it would not check for crashes. All it would do is it would call the function check for crash, which is empty, and then carry on with life, right? So functions aren't magic. Just because you say, hey, call a function that says check for crash, it doesn't just do it. It does whatever code you've got there. So let's go ahead and add some code inside check for crash. So in order to do this, you need a pencil and paper, which I forgot again today. So I'm going to pause the video, go get a pencil and paper, and I'll be right back. All right, I've got my pencil and paper magically, instantly. And so what we need to do is we're going to need to check if we're touching the color of the track. So I know that I'm going to need that color, so I'm just going to go get it first. So to go get that color, you can click on the pencil icon for the stage because there is a costume there. You can just click on the pencil. And we need to figure out what color is my track and simultaneously what color is my outside wall. So this game is simple. You click on the eyedropper. You click on your color. You click on the multicolor tool, and then you say hex. Still cracks me up. So write down your color. Mine appears to be that crazy combination of letters and numbers. Again, the letters are going to be A through F, so you don't have to worry about, like, is that a 0, is that a O? It's a 0 because it can't be an O. All right, so now we're going to check for crash. Checking for something is an if statement. So we're going to say if, so it's in control. That's the top one, in control. So if this condition, then run this code. The condition we want to check for is in sensing. We want to check if we're touching a color. And then this is where you need to type in that number that you wrote down. These boxes are always kind of annoying. I find that if I click at the end of it and I just backspace over it, oops. All right, so I'll type in my number here. And again, you might have to fight with this box some until you get it. Use the left and right arrow keys to kind of navigate back and forth, and delete key until you work it out. Now you'll know that it works because it's going to match the color perfectly, right? So at least you do get that confirmation before you run your code that, yeah, it's going to work, right? All right, so now if we are touching that color, what do we want to have happen? Well, we want to switch our costume to that crash costume. We also want to decide, like, do we want to just end the game outright, or what do we want to do? For now, we'll just end the game, like after a short pause. So let's go ahead and switch costumes. So that's going to be in looks. And we're going to say switch costume, switch to costume. And now if you named your costumes, they'll have good names. I was good. I named mine Car and Crash. So I'm going to say switch costume to Crash. Now, whenever I start dealing with costumes like this, like if I switch to Crash later, I find that it's always good practice to switch to your normal car right on the startup. Sometimes it turns out not to be necessary, but I always welcome doing it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab another switch to costume, and I'm going to put it between on start and forever. This is a good place to do kind of like your setup work, right? And so in this area, we're going to switch to the car. So that way, even if it's got crashed in a previous round, it'll be reset. Now, what we're actually going to do is we're just going to end the game if that happens. Ending the game is in control. And we scroll down. And we're going to grab the stop all. Now, we're going to come up with a better thing to do after a while, but for now, just to kind of test it, this is what we want to happen. So we're going to switch to costume crash, and then the game's going to stop. Now, I happen to know that there's a bug here, and the bug is that as soon as the game ends, as soon as stop all happens, then you don't see anything else. It just resets at the beginning. So I want to actually wait for a little bit between those two activities. Maybe I'll wait for like 3 seconds. So that way you can see your car in its crash mode, and then you can actually know that you're crashed. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And I'm going to intentionally just crash right into a wall. Cool. And so I can see that I've got a nice little car crash, which is fun. And then my game did stop. So the only way I can play it again is by hitting the button again. And then you can race it around your track. And you can see how long you can make it, right? And if you hit the outsides, that should make you crash as well. By the way, you can also add sound effects. Sound effects are fun. Oops, hold on. I did not mean to do that. And so if you want to add a sound effect, that can be a fun thing to do. To add a sound effect, we have kind of tried to play with this before. You can click on the race car gear. You can go into sounds, and you can add a sound. Now you can add sounds from their library. You can look around and play sounds. And so what you could do is you could do a search if you want to look for something. So if you want to add it, you click on the top icon. If you just want to play it, you just hit the play button below it, right? And so that's the way that works. So I'm going to choose to add an explosion. And what that does is that, much like costumes, that makes it a costume I can use. This makes it a sound I can use. Now I can use that sound effect in my code, right? So what I'm going to do is I've now got the ability to use that sound effect. I'm going to go into the sound area. And there's two types of sounds. There's play sound until done. That would be a fine one to use. Or there's just play sound. Right now, I'm just going to play sound explosion. And so now what you can do is you can try your game again. And now when you crash your car, you should hear a sound and see the costume change. Now, you probably can't hear my sound because of how I'm set up here to record audio, but it should work for you, right? So you should be able to crash your car, you should be able to hear a sound, and then see the crash. All right, so now we're ready to add the final cool feature. Instead of just switching to one costume, which is our crash costume, and stopping the game, we're going to play an animation. Animations are really fun. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take these 3 lines of code, switch costume, wait for 3 seconds and stop all, and just kind of like set them over to the side, right? So we're actually, you could delete them because we don't really need them anymore. But I like to keep code around because I went to all the trouble of writing it. And instead we're going to play a crash animation. Now, just for the sake of practicing with functions, let's make another function called play crash animation. So go to functions, create a function, play crash animation. So we're learning about 2 things. We're learning about functions, play crash animation, the function, and we're also going to learn about animations, right? So kind of a neat little double dip. So the first thing you got to do is you got to go find the start of your function. So let me get my code organized here. So you can see that functions can be good just for kind of like describing what's happening. So I want to play this explosion and then play a crash animation. I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm going to call the function first. So the way you call a function is it kind of makes a block for you, right? And I put it below play sound. So it's kind of neat. Functions are like your ability to make your own blocks that can do anything, right? So it's really kind of neat. So now when we're touching this color, we're going to play a sound, an explosion in this case, and then we're going to play a crash animation. All right, so how do we play an animation? Well, the way you play an animation, we've kind of seen the starts of an animation. You switch from one costume to the next costume. And in the same way animators do it, if you make these costumes kind of like close together, it can look like movements happening, which is kind of cool. So really an animation has to start with the costumes. So we're going to have to go back into our race car again. So click on the little gear. And right now I've got 2 costumes. I've got one called car and one called crash. Here's what I want to do. Instead of having one costume called crash, I want to have 5. So we're going to make some copies of it. So I'm going to duplicate it. Now I've got 2 crashes. Duplicate 3 crashes, 4 crashes, and 5 crashes. Now you'll notice that when you do this, it picks names for you. It picked, just crash, and then crash 1, crash 2, crash 11, crash 111. Not the best names. I'm going to change these names to be crash 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Oh, and it's drawing a oopsie. It apparently put a little text on there to number them. I didn't really mean to number them. All right, so I want their names to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I started from the bottom to move up. Oh, I see. I'm currently drawing text boxes because I've got that selected. All right, I just wanted to change the name. Silly computer. Even as you get older, you still talk to your computers quite a bit, right? And so my goal is to make eventually 5 copies, and I want to name them Crash 1, Crash 2, Crash 3, Crash 4, and Crash 5. Whew, that was harder than I would have expected. All right, so for each crash, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add smoke, right? So I'm going to zoom to where I can see the whole thing, because I always have to do that. And I'm going to have some smoke coming out of my car. The first one is going to have no smoke. The second one is going to have small smoke that's kind of like near the car. And then each one, the smoke's going to get bigger and farther away. To draw my smoke, I'm going to draw circles. I'm going to use some like dark gray color. And I'm not an amazing animator, so I'm just going to make like a few circles. So I'll just kind of like make a couple circles that are kind of like near the car to start with, right? So that is the beginnings of my smoke animation. So that's my Crash 2 scene. And by the way, you can play these things, but let's go ahead and make some more smoke. So now go to the next frame in your animation. So Crash 3. There's no smoke on this one. Oh, I do have that silly 3 on here. That was an accident. Don't do that. I didn't get rid of that. So here's what I want to do on frame 3. I want to know, like, where were my smokes in the last frame, right? And draw them a little bigger and a little higher. Now, here's where Tynker has a nice tool for you. This tool right up here, if you click on this tool, what it'll do is it'll show you a ghost of your previous frame. So see how whenever I click it, I get a little ghost of those old bubbles? That kind of shows me where was the last frame. And that's actually really helpful for animations, because now I want to draw them a little bigger and a little higher, right? And then you're going to keep doing this process. So there I've drawn my Crash 3. Now I switch to Crash 4. Now in Crash 4, it shows me a little ghost. The lady who made the virtual pets talked about this quite a bit, but she's like, that's how real animators work too, right? So they use ghost of the previous frame, and then they can make them continue to get bigger. And then for my final frame, they're gigantic, right? And what you can do, which is kind of fun, is you can hit this play button and you can kind of see what your animation looks like, right? Now, we're doing a relatively simple animation. I'm just doing some smoke circles that come off. But you can do a lot of creative things with animation. This is where like coding and art really come together nicely. You can make, a 100-page animation flip book with just a little bit of code and a lot of drawing if you'd like to do that. So you could spend all your time practicing your art skills when you're doing coding, which I think is really fun. All right, as soon as you've got your Crash 1, Crash 2, Crash 3, Crash 4, and Crash 5 all set, we're ready to go write some code to actually bring your animation to life in code. So let's go back to our code. And inside of our play Crash animation, we want to put a forever loop. So inside of our forever loop, so forever, what we want to do is we want to switch costumes and then wait a little bit. So let's go look at our commands and looks and see if we can figure out how to do this. So one thing we could do, we'll just kind of talk about them, is we could put in a next costume and below that we could put a time delay, and that would almost work, except for our smoke would get bigger, bigger, and bigger, and then our car would be cured, and then our car would be crashed and the smoke would come out again. But there would be that one frame in there that I don't like. If I just used next costume and went through all of them, there'd be that one glitch that I don't like. Another thing I could do is I could just say switch to costume, and I could just put in each one individually. And so I just have like, the first thing is I switch to Crash 1, I wait. Switch to Crash 2, wait. Switch to Crash 3, wait. And that would work, it's just tedious. Here's the one I want. Next costume starting with. So that's the command that I actually want. And I want to start with, and if you click in here, it'll kind of show you your different costumes. That's nice, because I'm going to click on Crash 1, but then I'm going to take off the 1, all right? And so what it's going to do is it's going to switch to the next costume that starts with the word Crash. And so that way, it won't include our car frame in our animation. It'll just do the Crash ones. And you do need a small delay between them. So you can grab a wait. And you can decide how long you want between your animations, right? So let's say that I want 0.3 seconds. I don't know what's going to look good. You just have to play with it until you figure out what looks good. And so now I'm ready to try my animation, right? So our first ever animation together. Looks like my car has disappeared. So every so often there are bugs in life, and whenever you get like weird bugs like that, like my car just disappeared, where'd my car go? I am not quite sure what's going on there. I'm just going to refresh the page. I saved it first. Should have pointed that out in big bold letters. I saved it first. Hey, there my car is back. Should things like that happen? No. Do things like that sometimes happen? Oh, yeah, apparently so. And your goal is just to get better with your tools until you figure out how to do it. All right, so my game is playing just fine. And now if I come around for my big crash, boom, and my animation. Fun. And that animation is kind of like with the car no matter where it's at. So I've kind of got this smoke that's coming out. So I'm sitting there and just kind of like smoking. I consider this a finished game. So there's all kinds of enhancements that we can make. So I'm going to tell you about some of those. And then I'm going to go around, I'm going to check to see how my campers did. I'll tell you what, to give them just a second to finish theirs up, I'm going to show you some possible enhancements. So there are some crazy enhancements you could do to this one. One enhancement you could do is to make a second car. Now you might think, oh, that's going to be a lot of trouble. There's no way I'm going to take the time to make a second car. It turns out that making a second car is actually easier than you think. You just duplicate this car, and then you go into this other car and you change his color. Like let's say I wanted him to be blue. You just have to change his color in all your different versions that you've got of your animation. Which I guess that's the hard part, right? So I could go through and I could change the rest of them. And then you change what keys he moves on. A popular set of keys to do is WASD is kind of like your other arrow keys. And you can see that with just like a couple lines of code, now I can move one car with one set of arrow keys and then the other car with the other set of arrow keys. I actually didn't made my red car do that, but you can see that you can make a two-player game pretty easily. I'm going to undo that before I ship this, but that's okay. Other things you could do if you wanted, in addition to making a two-player game, you could use like speed boost. So here, my red is a slow down and my green is a speed up. I've also got oil slicks that if you hit an oil slick, it kind of wipes you out. So that's something that you could add if you wanted. You could also add things like winning, right? So some people don't like to make a game unless they can win it. But if you make some color that's like a finish line, you could win your game too, right? So there's a lot of neat enhancements you can make. I'm not going to go into these. I was just kind of telling you some things that you could do if you wanted, right? And so yeah, those are some things that you could do. All right, so I think it's time to I'll tell you what, before I ship my game, I'm going to delete my race car one because I don't need him. That was just a demo for you guys. I'm going to save and publish. And so this is day 4, connecting with code week 1. I like to do a save and publish so that other people can see my work. But I'm curious to see how my campers did today. Keegan, are you ready to show us your progress today? All right, so Dr. Keegan, Dr. K. So it looks like he's got a cool track, he's got an awesome car. And then he's got a nice crash. And then I saw his smoke come up. Looks like he had a one smoker smoke animation. Looks fun. All right, Bowen. Did you succeed today? Tell us about your game. Oh, I love your car. Can you steer your car? Well, you bet. And then what happens to your car if it hits a wall? You gotta hit a wall, buddy. Whoa! He crashed big time. Oh, and look at your animation, buddy. Hey, was that fun? Did you like coding today? Did you learn about functions and animations today? Big day. All right, McKinley, you ready to show us yours? All right, looks like she's trying to do something enhancements. I see a finish line on here.
I haven't made the enhancement for it yet. I want it to not just be a finish line, but check how many laps.
Oh, she wants a
1 lap, 2 laps, type of counter type thing.
All right,
crash it.
Oh yeah,
crash and animation.
Hey McKinley, you've coded a lot. Have you done animations like this before?
Not really.
Have you done functions like this before?
Not too much.
Yeah, I learned a lot of good things. A lap and a half. All right, so that's all we've got for today. Come back next time for our final day. We're going to do some more advanced things with functions. Hopefully you learned a lot. Hopefully you got some ideas to make your game even cooler. See you next time.
Bye.